I'm Megan Taylor. I'm 32 years old, and there's a moment burned into my memory so deeply that no amount of therapy can erase it completely. Picture this Union Station in Chicago, grand marble floors cold beneath my cheap sneakers, the place humming with the sounds of rushing travelers' train announcements echoing above. My mother, Eleanor, leaning out of our family's blue Ford Taurus, her sharp voice cutting through the chaos as she laughed. "Let's see how you find your way home." And then they were gone. If you've ever felt abandoned, truly abandoned by the people who were supposed to love you most, you're not alone. I see you. Drop a comment below if this resonates and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just my story, it's about what happens when the so-called American dream rots from the inside out. But to understand that awful moment, you have to know what came before. On the outside, we were perfect. The Taylors of Ridgeview, Pennsylvania. My father, David Taylor, ran the most successful hardware store in the county, Taylor's Hardware. They don't make 'em like David anymore, neighbors would say. And my mother, Eleanor, she was practically a legend. Her bakery, Sweet Seasons, was famous for its blue ribbon apple pies winning every year at the county fair. Our big colonial house with the wraparound porch, perfect lawn, and tasteful Christmas decorations, people thought we were the epitome of success. The quintessential American family. Inside it felt like a rigged game. From as early as I can remember, I was compared to my older brother Connor, the golden boy. Connor was everything they could want. Star, quarterback, honor student, future leaders of America president. Every inch of our living room was filled with his trophies, plaques, and framed newspaper articles. I used to call it the Connor Museum. And me, I was the scapegoat. Sensitive, too soft, too artistic, those were their favorite accusations. The memories swirl the sharp look my mother gave when I proudly showed her a report card with straight A's, except for one A- in science. "What happened to the other 3%?" she asked coldly. Dad didn't even bother looking up from his whiskey. "Connor never got an A-," he said, and that was that. Every failure, every inconvenience in our house found a way to land at my feet. If dinner burned, it was because I distracted Mom. If Dad was in a foul mood after work, it was because I'd needed help with homework the night before. The imbalance wasn't just favoritism, it was systemic. It was baked into our family culture. As I got older, I internalized the blame. I tiptoed around the house, avoided eye contact, and tried to make myself smaller, quieter, less disruptive. Meanwhile, Connor's successes were paraded for all to see. But the punishments, that's where it went from dysfunctional to cruel. When I was 7, they left me alone in the grocery store because I'd asked for a chocolate bar. For a whole hour, I sat near the checkout counters, clutching my dollar bill and crying softly as the manager hovered awkwardly nearby. When I was 10, they forgot to pick me up from piano lessons again, a lesson in their twisted version of independence. They called it tough love. The mantra was repeated so often that I began to believe it. "We're raising you to be independent, Megan. You need to learn that the world won't hand you anything." But things escalated the summer I turned 11. That year, they promised me something rare, a birthday party. I could hardly sleep the night before, so excited to have my friends over. I helped my mother bake cupcakes lemon with cream cheese, frosting my favorite, and even set out the paper plates. But on the morning of my birthday, Dad came into my room, ruffled my hair a little too roughly, and said, "Change of plans, kiddo. We're going to Chicago today." Chicago. It seemed exciting, different. They told me Connor couldn't come, he had football practice, but that made it feel special. Like maybe, just maybe, this was a rare moment of them choosing me. The drive was almost 3 hours, but my hopes stayed high the whole way. Mom packed sandwiches, humming along to the radio as Dad quizzed me on state capitals from the driver's seat. Their mood was unsettlingly cheerful. In hindsight, it was eerie, like the calm before a storm. When we arrived at Union Station, Dad parked near the grand entrance, then turned to me with an unnervingly warm smile. "Megan, honey, we just need to move the car to a better spot. Wait here by this pillar. We'll be back in 15 minutes and then grab lunch." My gut twisted, but I nodded. "Can I come too?" I asked. Dad laughed, sharp, cold. "What are you, a baby? You're 12. You can handle waiting 15 minutes. I clutched my small backpack and stepped out of the car. The marble floor was freezing beneath my sneakers. I watched as they walked away, disappearing into the crowd, and waited. 15 minutes passed, then 30. I kept glancing at the main doors, hoping their smiling faces would appear any second. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. At the 1-hour mark, panic was full-blown. Then, as I approached the giant windows, I saw it, the blue Ford Taurus creeping slowly along the curb. Relief surged until I saw them inside. Dad behind the wheel, grinning not with joy, but with mockery. Mom leaning out the window, hair perfectly styled as always, yelling those unforgettable words. "Let's see how you find your way home." Their laughter echoed even after the car accelerated and disappeared into the chaos of Chicago traffic. And right there at 12 years old, clutching my backpack and my breath, I felt something inside me snap. The cold seeped through my shoes into my bones, but my mind was on fire. Was this love? I didn't have time to cry. I didn't have time to think. I was alone in a strange city with $7 in my pocket and no idea how to survive. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, a man in a long brown coat stopped right in front of me. "Are you lost?" he asked, eyes narrowing, his voice calm but unreadable. That's where this really begins. My breath caught as the man in the brown coat crouched down beside me, his eyes narrowing under the brim of a battered fedora. His face was weathered lines carved deep around his mouth and eyes, but something about his expression wasn't immediately threatening. Still, fear surged through me, cold and sharp, curling into my gut. Was this what my parents meant when they said the world was dangerous? Was this the moment they were preparing me for? My 12-year-old brain scrambled. I clutched my backpack tighter, my fingers aching from the grip. I felt the worn canvas under my palms, the weight of it suddenly so small, so inadequate. It held only a peanut butter sandwich, a half-empty water bottle, and my precious Mickey Mouse wristwatch, a birthday gift from when I still believed my family loved me. The man didn't move closer, just stayed crouched at eye level. His coat smelled faintly of tobacco and winter wind. "Are you lost, sweetheart?" he asked again, this time his voice softer, almost gentle. I hesitated, heart hammering. I remembered all those warnings from my parents, don't talk to strangers, don't trust anyone. But hadn't they just driven away laughing? And wasn't he the only one who had even noticed me, a scared little girl frozen by a pillar in one of the busiest train stations in America? I opened my mouth, but no words came. My throat was dry tight, my tongue like sandpaper. Before I could decide what to do, a woman's voice cut through the noise. "Frank, what are you doing?" A woman in her 60s approached, her silver hair pulled neatly into a braid down her back. She wore a red station employee vest over a thick navy sweater, and her name tag read Janet. The man straightened, brushing invisible lint from his sleeves. "Found this one looking a bit lost," he replied. His tone was light, but something about the exchange felt rehearsed, like they knew each other, and suddenly that made me even more nervous. Janet crouched down next to me, her blue eyes meeting mine. She spoke gently but firmly, like she could see how close I was to falling apart. "Are you waiting for someone, honey?" The question unraveled me. My mouth trembled as I forced the words out. "My parents, they left. They said they'd be back in 15 minutes, but it's been over an hour. Then I saw them, they drove by, they laughed." Janet's face shifted instantly, first a flicker of disbelief, then a hardening around the eyes that told me she understood more than she was letting on. "Okay," she said calmly. "Let's go somewhere quiet. All right, just you and me." Frank stayed where he was as Janet gently placed a hand on my back, guiding me through the crowds. My feet moved automatically, though my knees felt weak. The marble floors seemed colder, now the station bigger, noisier, full of rushing adults who didn't seem to notice a crying girl being led away. Janet took me into a small room tucked behind the customer service counter, a quiet haven compared to the swirling chaos outside. She handed me a paper cup of water, the cool plastic trembling in my hands. "Sweetheart, what's your name?" she asked softly. "Megan Taylor," I whispered. "And how old are you, Megan?" 12. Her expression darkened for just a second, a flash of anger that wasn't directed at me, but at the situation itself. "All right, Megan, I'm going to help you," she promised. I believed her. And for the first time since that morning, I let myself cry properly. The tears came in hot, silent streams at first, then sobs that made my whole chest ache. Janet didn't rush me. She simply sat beside me, her hand resting gently on my shoulder, waiting for me to run out of tears. When I could finally breathe again, she asked the question that changed everything. "Do you have anyone we can call grandparents, an aunt or uncle?" The reality hit me like a slap. I had no one. My family was my family, the Taylors, and they were gone. I shook my head. Janet exhaled slowly, then reached for the phone on the desk. "We're going to get help, okay? You're safe now." Her words felt warm, but the coldness inside me didn't thaw. As she called station security, my gaze fell on my wristwatch, the one thing I still had that connected me to the person I used to be. The ticking hands felt cruel now, marking every second that passed since my parents' betrayal. Through the thin door, I could hear train announcements. I wondered what it would feel like to climb aboard one of those trains and disappear forever. No one would stop me. No one would care. Then Janet's voice cut through my thoughts. "Security is on their way, Megan, and we might need to call the police too." Police? My heart raced again. I'd been raised to believe that police were dangerous. If you made mistakes, that they'd take you away if you didn't behave. Was this another punishment? Would they take me somewhere worse than this? As if reading my mind, Janet added gently, "You haven't done anything wrong, sweetheart. But what your parents did, that's not okay. The police will want to make sure you're safe." Her reassurance helped, a little. Minutes later, a tall security guard arrived, a kind-looking man named Marcus, with dark skin and a salt and pepper beard. His presence was calm but commanding. "Hey there, Megan," he said, crouching down so we were eye level. "Janet tells me you've had a tough day." Tough day. That was putting it lightly. I nodded, eyes still glassy with tears. Marcus didn't rush me either. He gently asked questions, my parents' names, where we lived, whether I remembered our phone number. I recited it automatically, even as my fingers trembled. Then he said the words that made my stomach drop. "We're going to call them now. All right, let's see what's going on." That was the moment everything shifted again. Marcus dialed the number on speakerphone. I sat frozen, every muscle tight, as I listened to the phone ringing. Once, twice, 3 times, and then my mother's voice. "Hello," Marcus spoke calmly. "Mrs. Taylor. This is Marcus, a security officer at Union Station, Chicago. I'm with your daughter, Megan." There was a pause. A long, cold, deliberate pause. Then in a voice I'll never forget, my mother said simply, "I don't have a daughter," and she hung up. Silence filled the tiny office, heavier than anything I'd ever felt. Janet and Marcus exchanged a glance, but their pity couldn't touch the cold horror that settled over me. My hands tightened around the paper cup, water spilling over onto my jeans as a single devastating truth sank in. They hadn't abandoned me by accident. They meant for me to disappear. And that was when I realized I was truly on my own. The air inside that small office felt suddenly too tight, too heavy. My fingers curled instinctively around the paper cup again, but it was empty now, like me. Marcus kept his face composed, but even as a 12-year-old, I could see it, that flicker of shock followed by something that felt like pity. Janet placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder, her fingers warm and steady, grounding me for one small second in a world that had just come unmoored. She said, "She didn't have a daughter." I whispered, my voice dry, almost detached. I tasted salt on my lips and realized I'd been crying again without noticing. Marcus cleared his throat and knelt beside me. "Megan, listen to me carefully, okay? That doesn't mean you're alone. We're going to figure this out." But I was alone. I felt it deep in my chest, a hollowness that vibrated with every tick of the Mickey Mouse watch on my wrist, a cruel reminder that time was still moving forward, even though my world had just stopped. And somewhere outside that tiny room, families laughed, rushed to catch trains, clutched children's hands. They belonged. I did not. Janet straightened up and exchanged a quiet word with Marcus before crouching again, lowering her voice. "Sweetheart, I need to ask, do you want us to call Child Protective Services, or do you want to wait a while?" I didn't know what Child Protective Services really meant, but the very idea terrified me. I pictured gray buildings, harsh voices, worse loneliness. My parents always made it sound like the ultimate punishment where bad kids ended up. For the first time since they drove away, something inside me shifted, not just fear, but a spark of something sharper. anger. I wiped my face clumsily with my sleeve and sat up straighter. I can figure this out, I said, surprising even myself. Marcus and Janet shared a glance concern written all over their faces. I can get home, I insisted, feeling the lie taste bitter on my tongue even as I said it. Janet leaned in, lowering her voice further. Megan, you don't have to do this on your own. There are good people who… I cut her off, shaking my head. I just need a minute. Maybe it was childish stubbornness. Maybe it was pride. Or maybe it was that very mantra they'd drilled into me all my life, finally taking hold in the worst way. You have to be independent, Megan. In that moment, I clung to that twisted lesson like a lifeline. Marcus hesitated, then gently said, I'm going to step outside for a minute, talk to my supervisor. Janet will stay here with you. As soon as he left, I could feel my pulse speeding up again. A risky idea was already forming in my mind. If I let them call the police, I'd be put into the system, whatever that meant. Foster homes, institutions. My parents' stories had been full of horror about those places, and even though I no longer trusted their version of the truth, the fear stuck. So I made my decision. Janet knelt to offer me another cup of water, and that's when I moved. Quiet, but fast, slipping past her as she reached toward the desk, ducking out the half-open door. Her startled voice followed me down the hallway, but I didn't look back. The station was a maze, but I'd memorized the way back to the main concourse earlier, pacing anxiously while waiting for them to return. Now, adrenaline pushed me forward faster than I thought I could move. The cold air hit my face as I burst through the exit doors onto Canal Street, the sounds of Chicago swirling around me, honking taxis chatter, the distant rattle of the L trains above. And there I stood, a 12-year-old runaway, clutching a backpack that suddenly felt much too light. I had no plan. The wind whipped at my thin jacket, and the Mickey Mouse watch on my wrist seemed louder than ever. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The weight of that watch, my only remaining link to my childhood, felt almost unbearable. That's when I noticed him, the man in the brown coat, Frank. He was leaning against the far corner of the building, watching me not with surprise, but with expectation. My stomach dropped. Had he been waiting this entire time? Why for who? 1,000 warnings flashed through my mind about strangers and predators. But something about his stillness made me freeze instead of run. Then he tipped his hat slightly, almost like he knew me. Looks like you made your choice, kid, he said calmly, his breath fogging in the cold air. Who are you? I finally managed my voice trembling, but audible. Instead of answering directly, he stepped forward, keeping his hands visible, non-threatening. I knew your mother years ago. Before you were born. His words felt like a slap. What I whispered. He nodded slowly, his gaze serious now. Eleanor and I, we go way back. And I'm guessing she never told you a thing about that, did she? No, she hadn't. My mind reeled as I tried to process this. Why would a stranger, a man my mother knew decades ago, be standing here outside Union Station as if waiting for me? I felt sick. You're lying, I blurted, but my voice lacked conviction. He smiled faintly, but didn't deny it. Look, Frank continued gently, you're going to need help, whether you want to admit it or not. And your mother? Well, let's just say she's done things you don't know about. His eyes darkened just a shade. Things that explain why she left you here. I couldn't breathe. Janet's face flashed in my mind, kind and concerned. And for one brief second, I almost turned back, almost ran toward the relative safety of that tiny office. But something about Frank's quiet confidence about this strange, sinister hint of a connection to my mother rooted me to the sidewalk. Tell you what Frank said, reaching slowly into his coat and pulling out a small, battered envelope. On the front was my name, Megan, written in my mother's unmistakable handwriting. I've been holding this for a long time, he said softly, extending the envelope toward me. It's yours now. My fingers shook as I reached out. But before I could touch it, a blaring police siren split the air. Both of us froze. And that's where I'll stop for now. ChatGPT'd and I. The police siren pierced the air loud and sudden, like the world itself was snapping me out of whatever dangerous path I was about to step onto. Frank's hand froze mid-air, the small battered envelope hovering just inches from my fingers. For one dizzying second, I thought about grabbing it anyway, snatching the envelope from this strange man's grasp and running into the unknown. but something in his expression changed, hardening in an instant as though he was calculating, weighing options. Without a word, Frank slipped the envelope back inside his coat, his eyes never leaving mine. The siren grew louder, a squad car swinging around the corner, its flashing lights washing the sidewalk in blue and red. My heart thundered in my chest, my breathing shallow. I felt trapped between two forces, the terrifying, unanswered questions Frank represented, and the uniformed authority I'd been taught to fear, but who might offer safety. The police car came to a stop beside us, brakes squealing slightly. Out stepped Officer Ramirez, a name I would never forget. She was tall and broad-shouldered, her black hair pulled back tight under her cap, her face a mask of professional calm, but her eyes scanning me instantly with sharp concern. "Megan Taylor," she asked, her voice clear but not unkind. I swallowed hard and nodded, my voice too shaky to answer. "We've been looking for you, sweetheart," she continued, her gaze flicking toward Frank now, narrowing subtly. "Is this man bothering you?" Frank's lips twitched into something almost resembling a smile, but his eyes stayed cold. He raised both hands slightly, palms open, just making sure the kid didn't run into trouble. She looked lost. A lie, smooth and practiced. Ramirez didn't look convinced. She stepped slightly closer to me, shielding me subtly with her body. "Let's get you somewhere warm," she said, lowering her voice but keeping her tone firm. "You've been through enough today, haven't you?" I couldn't speak, but my legs moved. Almost without thinking, I stepped toward her, a small but decisive movement. In that moment, I felt Frank's gaze burning into my back, but I didn't turn around. As Ramirez gently guided me into the back seat of the police cruiser, I caught a glimpse of Frank one last time. He was already melting back into the crowd, his brown coat blending in his face, disappearing, but I knew somehow this wasn't the last I'd see of him. And that envelope, my name written in my mother's hand, it haunted me. Inside the cruiser, warmth blasted from the vents, but I felt colder than I had outside. My hands trembled in my lap, fingers brushing the cracked leather of the seat, the Mickey Mouse watch on my wrist digging slightly into my skin, a small but grounding pain. Ramirez started driving her partner, a younger officer with soft eyes, glancing at me in the rearview mirror but not asking questions. Instead, they talked quietly between themselves, codes and addresses, the radio crackling occasionally. When we arrived at the station, I was led gently but firmly inside, past rows of desks and tired-looking officers hunched over paperwork. Ramirez didn't leave me in the lobby. She took me straight to a small interview room, a little larger than Janet's office at Union Station, but somehow colder. A steaming cup of hot chocolate was placed in front of me, and she sat across from me, removing her cap and setting it aside. "Okay, Megan," she began, her tone careful, deliberate. "You don't have to say anything you're not ready to say, but we need to understand what happened today. Can you help me with that?" I nodded slowly, my throat dry. My fingers curled around the paper cup, absorbing the heat, but still feeling frozen inside. And then I told her everything. I told her about the birthday trip to Chicago, the pillar at Union Station, how they drove by laughing, how my mother had said over the phone that she didn't have a daughter. I didn't mention Frank not yet. That felt too big, too strange, too raw. Ramirez didn't interrupt. She simply listened, nodding occasionally, her face impassive but her eyes soft. When I finished, she sat back and sighed deeply. "Okay," she said quietly. "We're going to need to make some calls." "You did nothing wrong, Megan. Nothing. You're very brave for telling me all this." Her praise made something sharp twist inside me. Brave, I didn't feel brave. I felt small, forgotten, disposable. But her next words shattered whatever fragile hope I was clinging to. "We reached your parents earlier, as you know, and they're refusing to come get you." I swallowed hard, that hollowness inside me growing larger, swallowing any remaining warmth. "I think," Ramirez continued gently, "we need to contact Child Protective Services." There it was, the thing I'd feared most. I bit my lips so hard, it almost bled. I looked down at my wristwatch again, the Mickey Mouse face smiling up at me, ticking away cheerfully, mockingly. That's when the door opened. Not Ramirez, not another officer. It was a woman I didn't recognize. Late 50s, impeccably dressed, but not in uniform, dark slacks, a beige wool coat, pearl earrings that gleamed under the fluorescent light. Her hair was cut in a sharp bob, silver streaking through black. And her eyes locked onto mine, instantly cool and assessing. "Hello, Megan," she said softly but firmly. "My name is Evelyn. I work with the Department of Children and Family Services." Her smile was practiced professional. "I'm here to help you," she continued, her tone warm but precise. "You'll be coming with me tonight." Panic surged. With her to where? Some faceless institution, some stranger's home. But Evelyn wasn't finished. "And just so you know," she added casually, as if discussing the weather, "we've dealt with your family before." Before. That single word hit me like ice water. Before. She knew them, knew my parents. And suddenly, I realized this was bigger than just today. This was a history I hadn't been told. A history my parents had buried. And Evelyn knew everything. Evelyn's words clung to the air like smoke. "We've dealt with your family before." My fingers curled reflexively around the hot chocolate cup, lukewarm, now trembling slightly. Those words didn't just suggest familiarity, they cracked open a doorway to something much darker. My mind spun. What did she mean? How long had this shadow been trailing behind my family without me realizing? Evelyn sat across from me, her posture elegant but firm, every movement deliberate. She set a leather folder on the table between us, her fingers lightly tapping its worn edge. "I'm not here to overwhelm you," she said. Her tone carefully measured, as if she knew any sudden noise might shatter me completely. "But I think it's time you knew the truth." I stared at her. I didn't answer, but the silence was permission enough. She flipped the folder open. Inside were grainy, black and white photocopies of documents, old reports, typed notes with faded headers, and photographs. In one of them, I recognized a younger version of my mother, Eleanor, barely in her 20s, standing stiffly in front of what looked like a courthouse. Her hair was styled just as precisely as I always remembered it, but her expression was harder, colder. Next to her stood a man I didn't recognize, his arm slung casually around her shoulders. "Not my father," Evelyn pointed to the photo. "That was before she married David Taylor," she explained. "His name was Martin Blake. Your mother's first husband." My stomach twisted. First husband, she had never mentioned to anyone before my dad. "They were married briefly." Evelyn continued flipping to another document, but there were issues. My breath caught. I couldn't form words, but every nerve in my body screamed for her to go on. "She accused him of abuse," Evelyn said carefully. But the details, they didn't add up. It turns out she had a history, a pattern of making allegations when it served her. Another flip. Another photo. My mother, now pregnant, heavily so, but standing alone, arms crossed protectively over her stomach. "That pregnancy wasn't your father's, Megan. It was Martin Blake's. And that child." She paused, her gaze steady. "That child was you." I felt the world tilt a sickening lurch in my gut. No, I whispered hoarsely, shaking my head. "My dad is David Taylor." But even as I said it, 1,000 small inconsistencies from my childhood rushed forward. The coldness from my father, his distance. The way he lavished praise on Connor but barely acknowledged me. His constant comparison, Connor never got an A-. The backhanded compliments, the punishments, the subtle alienation. Evelyn softened her tone, leaning in. "David Taylor married your mother, knowing you weren't his biological child. He raised you, but it was strained from the beginning. Your mother, she made sure it stayed that way." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "So why did they keep me?" I asked, my voice shaking. Evelyn hesitated, choosing her next words with care. "Your mother, well, Eleanor was very skilled at appearances. Keeping you allowed her to present the image of a perfect blended family. The Taylors of Ridgeview, the American dream personified." The phrase felt like poison. The American dream. A house with a white picket fence, apple pies, perfect children. But under that polished veneer had been a child they never wanted. A child they resented. And now they'd finally discarded me completely. I felt hollow and heavy all at once. Evelyn reached into the folder again and pulled out a final document, a handwritten letter on aged, yellowed stationery. "She left this with us years ago," she said during a custody investigation that didn't go anywhere at the time. "I believe it's time you read it." She slid the letter across the table to me. I stared at it. The handwriting was unmistakable, my mother's graceful, looping script. Elegant and cruel. I unfolded it slowly, my fingers trembling. The paper crackled softly, a sound that felt deafening in the quiet room. "Megan," it began, "I have tried, truly tried to care for you the way a mother should. But you remind me too much of him, of Martin. You have his eyes, his mannerisms, his softness. All the things I hated and all the things that nearly ruined me. David tolerates you because I ask him to, but even that won't last forever. One day you will understand that this is not cruelty. It is survival. E." The letter slipped from my hands, fluttering to the floor. A chill ran down my spine. All these years, every cold glance, every sharp word, every subtle rejection, it wasn't about my grades or my sensitivity or being too soft. It was about blood. It was about inheritance. It was about my very existence being an inconvenient reminder of a past she wanted to erase. My mother hadn't just abandoned me that day at Union Station. She had planned this long before. "Why are you showing me this now?" I asked Evelyn quietly, my voice shaking but edged with something steelier than before. Evelyn held my gaze. "Because Frank, the man you met outside Union Station, he's not a random stranger." My blood ran cold. "He's Martin Blake's brother," she said. "And he's been following your family for years." My heart thudded painfully in my chest. "And Megan," Evelyn added gently, her voice tightening just slightly, "we believe he may be planning to petition for your custody." A strange mixture of terror and curiosity surged inside me. Frank, the man in the brown coat, the man who knew my mother, and now, possibly my uncle. The Mickey Mouse watch on my wrist ticked louder than ever. Tick-tock. The past was catching up, and it had found me. The room felt smaller now, the air dense as Evelyn's revelation settled over me like a heavy blanket. Frank was Martin Blake's brother, my biological father's brother, my uncle. The man in the brown coat who had watched me from the shadows at Union Station wasn't some stranger. He was family. A different kind of family maybe, but family nonetheless. And I had spent my entire life not knowing he even existed. I sat there silent, the letter from my mother still on the table between us, her elegant handwriting like tiny knives. Every curve of her script reminded me that everything I thought I knew had been a lie. Evelyn's voice cut gently through the fog in my mind. "Megan, I understand this is overwhelming, but we have to decide what comes next." Her words should have comforted me, but instead they only amplified the swirling chaos inside my head. Decide what comes next. I was 12. And yet here I was, completely on my own, holding pieces of a broken puzzle no child should have to solve. I couldn't stop staring at the Mickey Mouse watch on my wrist. Tick-tock, tick-tock. It felt like a countdown now, a reminder that time was still moving forward even as my world was frozen. What would that mean? I finally asked, my voice small. If he petitions for custody. Evelyn didn't hesitate. It would mean you'd live with him, Megan. He would become your legal guardian. The idea made my stomach clench. Live with Frank. The man who had waited for me outside Union Station like he knew I'd run. The man whose eyes seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. But then, what was the alternative? Foster care group homes. My heart pounded. I felt trapped between two worlds, neither of which I wanted. And that's when Evelyn leaned forward, lowering her voice even further. "There's something you need to understand about Frank," she said carefully. "We've kept an eye on him for a long time. He's complicated." Complicated, a polite word adults used when they didn't want to scare kids. But I wasn't just a kid anymore. Not after everything. "What do you mean?" I asked. Evelyn hesitated for the first time, choosing her words slowly. "Frank was the one who tried to get custody of you when you were a baby, before your mother married David Taylor. He claimed he could provide a better life for you than your mother ever could. But the court sided with her at the time. He's never stopped watching Megan. Never." A chill ran down my spine. Was Frank a protector or a predator? Why had he been waiting outside Union Station? How did he know where I'd be? And what was inside that envelope he'd tried to give me? My mind reeled as I processed the layers of deception that had shaped my life before I was even old enough to understand them. Across the table, Evelyn's face softened. "You don't have to decide tonight," she said gently. "You'll stay with a temporary foster family while we figure this out." But the thought of living with strangers, even kind strangers, felt unbearable. I need to see him, I blurted before I could stop myself. Evelyn froze. Frank. I nodded, my heart thudding in my chest. I need answers. Even as I spoke, I knew this was risky, maybe even dangerous. But it felt like my only chance to take back a little control in a world where every decision had been made for me. Evelyn studied me carefully, then finally nodded. We can arrange a supervised visit, she said. But you have to promise you'll tell me if you feel unsafe at any time. I nodded again, though my stomach churned. Hours later, though it felt like days, I found myself sitting in a small conference room at the police station, its fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. The air smelled faintly of coffee and something metallic. And then the door opened. Frank stepped inside, still wearing the same brown coat, his hat in his hands now. His eyes met mine instantly, calm, steady, unreadable. Hello, Megan, he said quietly. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to meet his gaze. Why were you there? I asked immediately. Outside Union Station. How did you know? Frank sat slowly across from me, folding his hands neatly on the table. I've been keeping track of you for a long time, he said, his voice low but steady. Your mother never told you about me, but I always knew where you were. A shiver ran down my spine. That envelope I pressed, what's in it? He hesitated just for a second before reaching into his coat and pulling it out again. The same battered envelope. My name on the front in my mother's handwriting. He slid it across the table to me. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The paper felt soft from age, worn thin at the edges. I took a deep breath and opened it. Inside was a single photograph. A young woman, my mother, standing beside a man I didn't recognize at first, until I realized he looked exactly like me, my biological father, Martin Blake. They were standing in front of a small suburban house, smiling, happy, before everything had gone wrong. Behind the photo was a folded note. This time it wasn't in my mother's handwriting. It was in Frank's. And it said simply, "She lied to everyone, including you. But I never stopped watching. Ask me what really happened." My heart pounded in my chest. Before I could speak, Frank leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Your mother made sure you'd never know the truth, Megan," he said. Then without breaking eye contact, he added, "And the truth is, Martin Blake isn't dead." Silence swallowed the room after Frank's final words, "Martin Blake isn't dead." The hum of fluorescent lights above me sounded suddenly louder, sharper. My ears rang with the impossible sentence I'd just heard. Not dead. All these years, I'd been led to believe I was an inconvenient reminder of a man my mother had despised, a man who was long gone, a ghost haunting her through me. And now Frank sat across the table with calm certainty, telling me that ghost was very much alive. I clutched the photograph tighter, its edges cutting into my fingers. The young man in the image, the man whose eyes mirrored mine, was still out there. Somewhere. My throat felt tight, but I forced my voice to steady. "Where is he?" Frank gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "That's complicated." My stomach twisted at those words again, complicated. Always a polite warning that nothing ahead would be easy or clear. But for the first time, I didn't shrink from that uncertainty. I leaned into it. "Tell me," I said, my voice firmer now. "Everything." Frank folded his hands on the table. "Your mother and Martin, their relationship didn't end the way she's told everyone. After she left him, there was a custody dispute, ugly and public. Eleanor won full custody partly because she told the court Martin was unstable, dangerous." His gaze hardened as he added, "It wasn't true. He wasn't perfect, but he wasn't what she claimed either." I listened to every word, rewiring the foundation of what I thought I knew. Frank continued. "After losing in court, Martin moved to California. He kept track of you from a distance, but Eleanor made it nearly impossible for him to get close again. She changed addresses, blocked every attempt he made to contact you." The pit in my stomach deepened. "So, he never abandoned me?" Frank shook his head. "No, he tried Megan, again and again. But your mother shut every door." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them away, determined to hold myself together. "Then why now?" I asked. "Why come find me today?" Frank let out a slow breath. "Because Martin is sick. He has cancer. Stage 4. He reached out to me 2 months ago, asked me to try again, to make sure you knew the truth before it was too late." My breath hitched. The truth. Too late. Those words echoed inside me, heavy and urgent. "He doesn't have much time," Frank added softly. The room felt suddenly smaller, suffocating. The idea that the man I'd imagined as a ghost all these years, a ghost shaped by my mother's bitterness, was real. Alive, dying, and waiting for me. "Does he want to see me?" I whispered. Frank met my gaze directly. "Yes, but only if you want to." That choice, a real choice, felt staggering. All my life decisions had been made for me. Who I was allowed to see, what I was allowed to know. Even who I believed I belonged to. Now the choice was mine. But how could I walk into the life of a man I'd never met? A man who carried his own complicated history, a history I'd been shielded from, not out of love, but out of control. Even as I wrestled with those thoughts, I felt a shift deep inside me, a stubborn, defiant spark igniting. I couldn't stay a passive participant in this story any longer. I needed answers from Martin himself. "I want to meet him," I said, my voice steady. Frank's face softened, something almost like relief passing through his expression. "I thought you might say that," he said gently. At that moment, Evelyn re-entered the room. She didn't look surprised. If anything, she looked resigned. "We can arrange a supervised visit," she said carefully, emphasizing the word supervised. "But you'll have to travel to Sacramento." Sacramento. The word felt foreign and distant, a place I'd never even imagined visiting. But it was where this story led now. Suddenly, the Mickey Mouse watch on my wrist felt heavier than ever, a strange talisman ticking down the time left for a man I didn't know, but who in some inexplicable way had always been part of me. I looked at Frank one last time, searching for any sign of deception, but what I saw was something else entirely. Regret, exhaustion, and just barely hope. "When do we leave?" I asked. Frank's lips curled into the faintest smile. "Tomorrow morning." Evelyn nodded. "You'll fly with an escort from our department. I'll go too." I exhaled slowly, trying to steady my racing thoughts. Sacramento. Martin Blake. A truth I never knew I needed. As Evelyn gathered her papers and prepared to finalize the travel arrangements, Frank stood and stepped toward me. He hesitated, then carefully placed a small wrapped package on the table. "For the trip," he said quietly. I frowned, but reached for it cautiously, unwrapping the brown paper. Inside was a well-worn book, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I opened the cover, and there, on the first page, was an inscription in handwriting I didn't recognize. "To my daughter Megan, for all the journeys we've yet to take. Love, Martin." The air felt suddenly too thick to breathe. And then Frank added, almost as an afterthought, but his tone heavy with significance, "He's known about your watch all these years, too." That made me freeze. "How?" I whispered. Frank's expression darkened. "Because he gave it to your mother before you were even born." The Mickey Mouse watch. All this time, it wasn't a gift from my mother. It was from Martin, my real father. Every second it had ticked on my wrist was another silent link to him, a truth she'd let me carry unknowingly. Before I could process that staggering realization, Evelyn's phone buzzed sharply on the table. She checked the screen, then froze. Her face blanched as she read whatever message had come through. When she looked up, her expression was grave. "There's been a development," she said, her voice tight. "What kind of development?" I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. She swallowed hard. "Your mother. She's here. At the station. She's demanding to see you." Story 2. I'm a 32-year-old woman who has been trying unsuccessfully to conceive for the past 7 years. My physical and mental health have suffered greatly since I was later diagnosed with PCOS. Because I can't give my 36-year-old partner the children he so desperately wants, I feel like a huge failure. I know he's upset, but he never makes me feel bad about it. Despite their poor health, his parents are very much looking forward to having grandchildren. I recently got into a heated argument with my 34-year-old sister. I asked her why this kept happening to me because I was upset. "It probably has to do with the procedure I had when I was 19. She shrugged. To be honest, I was amazed at how composed she sounded. She had been supportive at the time and was aware that there had been health reasons for it. I had spent months recuperating from an operation because I had been so ill. She is also aware of the guilt I felt for not being able to carry the pregnancy to term. When I asked her what she meant, she explained that some people were simply not meant to have children and that I needed to realize that I was the one who caused it. She also said that our choices always come back to haunt us, and it was a message from God to stop. She was being direct, not cruel. But because my hormones were out of control, I ended up throwing her out of my house and telling her not to get in touch with me ever again. My other sister, my mother, father, and even my sister's husband called me a lot shortly after, essentially telling me that I had overreacted and was being foolish, and that I needed to apologize and make amends. I declined, and I haven't communicated with any of them since. After what she said, my partner doesn't want her to return to our home anytime soon. Is it foolish of me to support him over my family? Not the concept. If she wasn't on the lease or paying rent at all, you wouldn't say anything like that to her. You are perfectly entitled to expel her. She is an adult. She can manage her own living arrangements without sharing a room with people she despises. I'm very sorry you're having problems, by the way. I hope you have a big, contented family in the future. Opie should, in my opinion, let her family know that her choices always end up backfiring on them, and that her sister needs to realize that she is to blame for this. Some people simply weren't supposed to be in Opie's home. Not that the fools aren't cruel. What could be more hurtful than what she said, really? Oh no. Your sister is wicked and has no compassion for you, Opie. Don't say sorry, don't back down, and don't let her in, and anyone who supports her. When I heard those two, I was taken aback. Her sister's words could not have been spoken without malice. According to my family and friends, they are brutally honest without being mean. Furthermore, it's merely a pretext for them to act like a complete moron without anyone being able to expose them. Since I'm just being truthful. Yes, exactly. A fool. When you don't know what you're doing, you don't say things like that. Not the fool. I've heard a lot of nonsense, but this is ridiculous. Your sister removes the wings, doesn't she? Don't worry, houseflies are also a problem. Why would anyone defend such harsh statements, or worse, downplay them by claiming that the original poster overreacted? It says a lot about a nice family, Opie, and not in a good way, that they support hateful sludge like this. Karma isn't involved. Most likely, it's your health problems and has nothing to do with the procedure you had done earlier. One for what I believe was a reason you spoke with a doctor about. She is the sole owner of her woo-woo claims. Additionally, if your twisted family believes her remarks were appropriate, perhaps they all need to live without you. In similar circumstances, I've also almost always observed that the family members who ultimately support the ex-offender provide justifications for their inability to accept them. I find it strange that they have every excuse to refuse to take in someone they have defended so strongly, or that they might reluctantly take them in once no one else is willing to assist. Again, not the fool either. They made a really bad statement. She ought to have kept on standing by you rather than making such offensive remarks. My 18-year-old son is about to graduate from high school. The day he was born, I began to save money for him. Like I do for my other children, I always contribute a little bit each week. I saved enough money over the course of 18 years for him to attend college debt-free. He has always been intelligent and diligent. In the end, he received full tuition to his preferred university. He makes us incredibly proud. Everything was going smoothly, and he was content and willing to accept it until I told him that I would fix up our house with the money I saved for him and use the remaining amount to support his siblings. That infuriated him, and he started to insist on the money. I was taken by surprise. I didn't think he would act this way. He has been having tantrums for the past week and has threatened to drop out of his ideal school and enroll somewhere else. He started screaming at his younger sister as soon as he got home last night. She was eating when he snatched up the plate and tossed it across the kitchen. Weeping, she ran to me. Harry said, "Yeah, hold your favorite child and ignore me," as soon as he entered the room and saw me holding you. I haven't heard from him since he left shortly after. He doesn't return my calls or texts. My son needs to move out right away, according to my irate husband. I asked a few family members, and they said that since I promised him the money and am now keeping it, I am to blame. I simply don't know how to proceed. I'm afraid he'll turn down his full scholarship, go to another school, accrue debt, and then demand the money. And I've never seen him so furious or accuse me of being a witch. My husband is angry with me and him, and I don't know where my son is or what he's doing, so I'm crying right now. Is it my fault that I didn't give him the money? Shall I simply hand it to him? The fool is you. You saved that money for your son who put in a lot of effort and received full tuition, but who lost his college fund. Thus, nothing about his personal circumstances is altered by his impressive accomplishments. And the one who gains from them is you. When he succeeds, you don't take away his money if you're proud of him. He must feel like he was punished for his intelligence and scholarship. That's pretty much what you've said. When he performs well, it's you who gets paid. You are the fool indeed. This is what my parents did to me. They hadn't saved the entire sum, but I was awarded a full tuition scholarship at about half of it. They took my scholarship as their half and withheld their own contribution, no matter how hard I had worked for it. It was terrible, and nearly 20 years later, I'm still very angry about it. I had to work more than 30 hours a week to pay for food, books, and rent rather than unwinding and concentrating on my studies. Here, everyone has an idea. When you promise a child something, that child works hard because they know you will keep your word. They receive a full scholarship to college in exchange, right? Given that you assured him that he would be debt-free following his college education, I'm not sure why you thought your diligent child would be appreciative of your punishment for his diligence. I think he's a fool for the violent outburst, but I'm curious about what else you've been doing to make your son feel inferior to his sister. That animosity does not appear suddenly. I concur with this. My initial reaction upon reading this was that it was likely not the first time he had felt that his siblings were being given preference. It's possible that this was the final nail in the coffin. Instead of making a casual remark about fixing the house and giving it to siblings, I believe Opie would have been better off sitting down and explaining the money if this isn't normal behavior. I'm a 29-year-old man who recently purchased a home a few months ago. An elderly couple in their 50s lives next door. With the exception of the occasional good morning, I would say that we don't really interact all that much. The last 2 weeks have been extremely hot. I'm too lazy to go out and buy a new air conditioner because mine broke. Even with the fan running, the house is still quite warm, even though the air is cool at night. Because of recent break-ins in the backyard and surrounding neighborhood, I don't feel comfortable leaving the windows open. One evening, at approximately 11 p.m., I have a hammock set up. I'm trying to fall asleep by turning over and over. I decided to go outside and sleep on my hammock after thinking, fuck it, and grabbing my pillow. It was really serene, I must say. On the second night, my next-door neighbors believed I was homeless and called the police. I had to let the police know that I own the house. The following day, my husband approached me and asked if I could not do that since it isn't really appropriate. It's quite hot in my house, and to be honest, I enjoy sleeping outside in the cool air. I apologized if I frightened them when they called the police. I've been doing that for the past few days. My wife isn't happy right now because I talk to her at around 7 in the morning. She enjoys coffee and conversation with her friends while they sit in her yard. Even though I'm far away, they can still see me from where they hang out because our yards are only separated by a small gate. She tells me that having me there completely unconscious makes her uncomfortable. They feel as though they are unable to communicate effectively, even though I am not even listening to them. I've already refused their repeated requests for me to stop. It's calm and quiet. It's my house and I have a good night's sleep. This really annoyed me, even though I'm not the type of guy who gets involved in disputes. Her husband told me a number of things that taken together suggest they think I'm a fool for refusing to comply. I wanted to see what other people thought because I have no idea why it's such a problem. Am I a fool or what? Not the concept. When they want to use your backyard, it appears that they simply do not want you to use it at all. They wouldn't be able to talk normally, so I'm sure they would ask you not to have a cup of coffee in your hammock in the morning. It belongs to you, and based on what you've written, you're most definitely not disturbing the peace. You're fine because it doesn't appear that you're dozing off in your birthday suit. Not the concept. They can't influence this. It's their problem, not yours. And they're attempting to make it your problem instead of handling it themselves. Inform them that it's 7 a.m. If the coffee clutch bothers you, request that it be moved inside. They probably scoff as well. Of course, this is their problem. Additionally, they no longer expected Opie to be understanding and cooperative in this situation when they report him to the police. At this point, they should realize that they are no longer able to ask Opie for any favors and feel absolutely ashamed. Although the sleeping person is constantly present, I completely understand that your neighbors don't want to be noisy around them. They seem to be attempting to be both burning out and considerate. I understand. Additionally, your reasoning about the dangers of open windows versus door unlocks is flawed, so that you can enter and exit. That doesn't even seem significant to me. It's his yard, his home. Since he can sleep anywhere he wants, people should move inside if they don't want to see him while they're sitting outside, as that would prevent him from ever being able to do so. Or perhaps they ought to replace the fence to keep him out of sight. For the past 7 months, our sister-in-law has been living with us without paying rent. She had nowhere else to go after splitting from her boyfriend. Therefore, we took her in, assisted her in finding employment, and allowed her to use our car and pay for gas until she had enough money to start making purchases around us. Last year, we took her along and paid for all the food at our $2,000 beach house rental, but she didn't pay anything. Co-signed a loan for her since she had good credit and was able to buy a car, eat meals prepared at home every day, and pay nothing for all of the food, electricity, and water she used. She will be earning roughly $1,800 per month at her new job, which she just got. Oh, the total amount of the bills is roughly $250. However, she claimed that charging $400 per month for a single bedroom and bathroom when she only stays here 5 nights a week was a dumb move. The house has 3 bedrooms, and she is staying in my wife's office, which she had to move into our bedroom because she works from home. Although she recently reserved a beach house for the weekend for her brother's birthday, she claims she is unable to pay the rent. Purchased $1,000 worth of ghost hunting gear, got inked, and plans to get more. With her new boyfriend, she usually spends the entire weekend driving around and visiting various attractions, paying for everything. I don't know if it's a fool, but my sister-in-law is family. Proceed to bill the family for the rent, not the fool. Rent is not something I charge. Expel her. She had no place to go, but now she has resources and a new job. You don't have to help her all the time. Your lifestyle is changing as a result of the more than enough you've done, losing the bathroom and additional space, etc. How does your wife feel about all of this? Since you must present a unified front. My wife agrees, but she prefers to stay out of the argument because she's a nicer person. It was me who first informed my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law asked my wife about it instead of responding to me, and she said that we both think it's fair for her to help. $400 is nothing. She's fortunate that you don't have it. We believe the conversation has lasted long enough. Why don't you have that conversation too? Is it a worldwide problem? It's been 7 months. They're taking advantage of you. Who among us as adults doesn't even offer to help, not the fool? Possessing a residence precedes indulgences like vacations and body art. For 7 months, you've been kind enough. She needs to stop sulking and either help out or move on. She cannot rely on you to support her financially indefinitely. She remained with you until she recovered. Now that she's back on her feet, she's driving around in a car you helped her buy with her new boyfriend. Now that your sister-in-law is employed, it's time for her to get a place of her own. You must regain your office. She's been living with you for 7 months, and you've been more than giving. If she refuses to leave quietly on her own, you might have to formally evict her. Be ready to do it. We haven't gone out to eat since my husband lost his job. We used to do it on a regular basis. We would happily spend more than $100 in a single evening, try new foods, and dine at fancy restaurants. We are currently having financial difficulties. At one point, we had to sell furniture in order to pay for food. By monitoring the budget and doing all the calculations, my husband has been strengthening his hold on the money. He always has his calculator with him, whether he's at the grocery store or the gas station. I advised him to relax, but he is constantly worrying about going over budget. He was able to fulfill his desire to take me out to dinner with the kids. We returned to the table. He asked what we were ordering after grabbing the menu and taking out his calculator. I instructed him to set down the calculator. It's embarrassing. He claimed that because he had a limited budget, he needed to know how much he would be spending on our meals. I kept asking him how much he paid overall after he finally placed the orders, and he replied, "I got it. Don't stress over it." When my husband saw the bill that the waitress had brought, he raised both eyebrows and muttered, "There must be something wrong." He then informed the waitress that we had ordered XYZ and that our dinner had cost $45. The amount on the bill which she showed me was $65. He showed her the number on his calculator and insisted she made a mistake. The waitress politely explained that he either miscalculated the numbers or his calculator was inaccurate. Telling her that his mother taught math but that he had learned from her made him angry. He never makes a mistake. I made an effort to calm him down. I could pay $20 because I had extra cash on hand. He maintained that he would only pay $45, accept it or reject it. "It's all right," I said. "I'll assist him with the cost." Taking offense, he declared that he would never allow me to pay. Why? Because groceries might cost that $20. The manager complied with his demand to see him. It came to $65. I took out $20 because I was tired, but my husband yelled at me to stop. The manager was then informed that he and the waitress were not deceiving anyone because the total cost was $45, not $65, and that this night would end if they didn't just accept the $45. At that precise moment, the manager asked us to leave the restaurant after taking the $45. I was furious. When my husband made a scene in public, embarrassed me and the kids, and refused to let me contribute to the cost I lost, it went outside and called him a cheapskate. Additionally, he should apologize for his actions because he miscalculated the number demonstrating the futility of his math skills. "I can't believe you just told me that," he said, looking at me, adding that he was merely attempting to persuade us to go out to eat. He is very upset and remained silent. Since I knew he was having trouble, I called him a cheapskate. Am I the fool? To tell the truth, I've never yelled at him, and I acknowledge that my words hurt him. Your husband is obviously going through a difficult period and experiencing an emotional breakdown, so I'm afraid to call anyone an idiot here. He requires assistance. He seems to be out of touch with reality. Nonetheless, judgment is required. You are not a fool for feeling angry and frustrated. He embarrassed you by being so impolite to the employees. Don't judge. Is he using his phone or is he carrying a calculator? I acknowledge that there isn't much of a difference, but I would be ashamed if it were a real calculator. Order a pizza and offer to pick it up the next time he wants to treat the family. Everyone has been under a lot of stress over the past year or so. He might be feeling anxious about the money in the family. He is unable to comprehend this. The husband is in serious need of assistance because he is experiencing severe anxiety. I would research mental health resources and always talk to him about this without passing judgment or downplaying his worries. He is currently in need of assistance and support. VAT as husband is incorrect on numerous levels. To begin with, he most likely neglected to include the tax. Why the manager didn't simply do the math in front of your husband is a mystery to me. It looks like some of the issues might have been resolved that way. Don't get me wrong, you did the best you could with the check, which I believe was for $65. It seems like if they had simply totaled everything in front of your husband, the issue could have been resolved swiftly.